Roma is Cuarón's most recent film, and it's it's the personal one, and the main character of it is this indigenous woman named Cleo, who's a live-in housekeeper maid of this rich family. And it's based on, I believe the woman's name is Lebo. That was his maid housekeeper person as he was growing up. And so part of making this movie was like he literally just interviewed her and talked with her and compared memories and stories and whatnot from that time. And conveniently, since this was on Netflix, they also kind of have a documentary on there of the making of or whatever. I've only watched about 10, 15 minutes of it because it was late last night when I watched this. But he's kind of just talking about creating this movie where there wasn't much of a script. He mostly created it just off the feeling and memory and the look of it, and then kind of the script was written as they go, especially with specific dialogue, because he got a lot of there's a bunch of kids in there obviously representing his family, and so the dialogue is just kind of what they did on that day, just because there was only a few professional actors in total kind of throughout the film. And so kind of the main thrust is following Cleo on her life, kind of working for this family, and then the main thrust is she ends up getting pregnant and how she goes through and deals with that. And it's also a big, it's basically just the struggles of life and overcoming challenges type of a film. And there's some brutal stuff kind of towards the end that I honestly didn't know was in the film until we got there. Throughout the film, even with every moment of hopeful and happiness, there's always like something like kind of counteracting it in the background, where it's surprisingly more downer of a movie than I was expecting. They still kind of end on a hopeful moment, because when you make a movie like that, you kind of have to. But it's just kind of like a fascinating slice of life type movie. It's a movie that's built more of around sensory images than it is a story and a script, and just such a incredible recreation of kind of his past life and house. As well as just some stunning shots in camera. We can kind of compare the two later on, but this movie in particular is just kind of a lot of slow panning shots that are also like very busy, where it's got like a lot going on and a bunch of things happening both in the foreground and background, and a large cast of characters, especially kind of at the family party and the riot and massacre scene. That obviously it's a stunning film, as he's a very gifted filmmaker in that sense. But yeah, I think just it's been one I've been meaning to see. I just never did.
Yeah, I think the massacre scene just portrays what it's like to have normal Mexican people living their normal Mexican lives, going through their own troubles in the backdrop of this like extreme violence at times. And it's a pretty powerful like juxtaposition. And I also got like strong like very close to like Grapes of Wrath with Rosa Sharon giving birth to her stillborn daughter at the very end. And to talk to Duncan's point about water being it's just like this baptism to that all the suffering may have been worth it and will wash away all of that and the future will be brighter or something like that. It's a cool film.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism of that kind of throughout the film, where he specifically says this in the documentary too, of just like starting the film staring at the at the ground and this water flowing by, and then you end the film of her climbing the stairs, up to kind of the roof of the house. But specifically, the shot is very much looking up and looking at the sky. So you can make some obvious interpretations off that, as well as kind of the scene on the beach towards the end where she's literally like fighting through the currents of water and her life in general.
Yeah, and they make it very clear that she doesn't know how to swim, but she's still doing it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, the birth scene was the scene I was referencing earlier, where I was kind of I was shocked at how intense and lengthy that scene was. It was very effective, but definitely shocked me last night.
Yeah, and apparently the actor who played Cleo didn't know that the baby was going to be deceased
God.
when it was born.
Jesus Christ.
So that her reaction is quite genuine.
Okay,
and quite
makes
immediate,
a lot more sense now. Yeah, for sure.
because they really didn't know. Only Cuarón knew the full script. The actors only knew parts of it, and they kind of learned the film as they performed it throughout the production. And she wasn't told whether the baby would be born alive or dead. And so when it happened, it was quite intense, her reaction, and the director had to apologize to her afterwards and was asking, "Did I go too far? Did I go too far?" And she's like, "No, I needed to feel that, but yeah, it was pretty hard."
It's wild.
And it is, yeah, it's a wonderful performance from this. I think this is the first film she's ever been in, and she was a non-professional actor when she was cast. And it's an amazing performance. It's very genteel but stoic and strong performer, and very observant. I feel like the whole film is just her observing the world around her. That's how the camera is shaped, as this observing lens that's always looking at what's around her, often for what needs to be cleaned, but also, the different details and the different moving parts of the world. And production-wise, there's so much going on in this film. There's the massacre scene itself, which just sort of starts off as a shopping scene and then kind of explodes into this like crowds of panicked people and violence and carnage. But there's lots of other scenes like where it starts off small and individual and then just like grows out from there. I think it gets at that idea that everything's connected, the private and the public, the individual and the political. We all just live our day-to-day lives 95% of the time, but every now and then the forces of history kind of like plunge in and interrupt our lives, and we get sucked into a bigger world. This is the second time I've watched it. I watched it when it was first released on Netflix, and I really liked it, but it wasn't until this second rewatch that I realized I loved it. Like, I was so pulled in. Absolutely stunning film to look at. The shots are like, they just like make you gasp at times. Individual like framed shots, but also the wide angle shots where you can't actually see what's happening. You can hear the characters talking, but you can't actually, it almost takes you a while to find them on the screen. Really creative. And the performance is the main thing. It's like so emotional. Like, I got so choked up towards the end with what happens to Cleo and her journey. It's really powerful.
So the actress who played Cleo was the first Indigenous American woman to receive a Best Actress Oscar nomination.
No, but I love this movie because I had seen two of the movies on our list previously. So the other two I wanted to go in just completely blind. So I had no idea what I was getting into in either movie. And this one, wow, did it catch my attention. Just especially with the filming style, because it was filmed in 65 millimeter film, which I had to immediately look up because I knew it looked too clean to be digital filming. And it almost evokes a surrealist kind of atmosphere and visuals. How you were talking with, just with everything panning back and forth. But it was a good one. But I'm also mad at, like, I was not getting into it expecting to feel any emotions, let alone confront emotions. But I think my favorite part about it is it's a slice of life. It's a moment of time, but from all of our perspectives, essentially.
Yeah, two other kind of recent movies that popped into my head watching this, that I also really liked. One of them is Banshees, Banshees of Inisherin, which has kind of the it's a similar like slice of life. You're kind of representing this kind of unknown aspect of the director's home country. It's set in the past, like there's a war going on kind of in the background, but not really. It's only tertiary to the main story. Even though that one's more of a dark comedy than kind of this like emotional journey that Roma is, which related to that. So the other movie I thought of is this smaller movie called Waves, which I don't really know the director of it. I mean, Sterling K. Brown is kind of the most notable actor in it, but Taylor, the girl from the those horror movies, which I'm blanking on. Anyway, it's a contemporary movie, but it's also kind of a slice of life of Taylor Russell. That's her name. Bones and All. She was in. And it's kind of this slice of life, overcoming struggle type of movie. The movie is kind of split into two parts, each following a different character, where the first one is this one character kind of just like spirals down as his life gets out of control and something very bad happens, and you kind of just hit the middle and like hit the bottom of the pit. And so then the second half of the movie is when Taylor's character kind of takes the foreground, and she has to essentially just like pull the viewer out of that pit into kind of the more happiness of enjoying life. And so those two kind of the different journeys that kind of happen in those two films really. So I saw a lot of that in this film as well, I've loved all three of those films. I would recommend them all.
What did you guys make of the relationship between Cleo and the family she serves?
I wanted more of it because I could see that it seems like she's been there a while with how much her and the kids love each other. It's like there's an actual familial love there. And I actually want more with Cleo and mother.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like that is honestly the more interesting relationship at the end of this film.
Yeah, it felt like we never really got a long scene of dialogue between them where they were connecting. It always felt like an employee relationship to me. And there's kind of like that cathartic moment at the end where they all tell Cleo they love her. But yeah, it felt like it didn't feel definitive. And maybe that's life. Maybe life is never definitive.
Socially, so my grandparents live in Peru, and they're both pretty elderly, and they have two live-in nurses, and they would laugh in their faces if the nurses ever asked them for a raise, but do realize that they cannot live independently without these two women. So it's a dynamic that I'm totally not familiar with and frankly uncomfortable with. But it does exist where even a lower middle class Peruvian will have almost an indigenous maid, no matter what.
Yeah, right. And it seems like part of it's a status symbol, and it seems like that at least for Cleo, she would absorb a lot of the kicks would always go down if the husband did something wrong. The wife would take it out on Cleo.
Yeah,
if the kids were acting up, she'd take it out on Cleo. So it's an uncomfortable relationship. And I wasn't really convinced that it had changed from anything but an employee relationship. Obviously, like Cuarón made this film about his childhood housekeeper who he obviously loved and had a strong relationship with, but that wasn't really explored so much. The relationship between Cleo and the children. You see a few scenes of them bonding, but it didn't feel like those child characters were expanded to any great degree. And I've seen a few critiques. Apparently, this film, it's sort of beloved outside of Mexico, but it's more contentious above Mexican critics about what the film means. Some of them accused Cuarón of making Cleo a bit of a cipher. Like, you don't really get a strong insight into her life before being a housekeeper, her relationship to her family, her hometown.
Yeah, but doesn't that make her an every woman?
Yeah, and there's something to be
I
said
don't
that, like,
understand that critique.
our
It's
day-to-day
just,
life.
yeah, like why
Yeah.
does
Well-
that need to be explored? It's her current situation that is reflective of the state of the Mexico, the state of the family that she works for, the state of her life at this time. Like,
Our day-to-day life and our work obviously takes up a lot more of our mental space than those kinds of things. Yeah, I don't know. What did you guys make of the ending where the family kind of, break down and confess their love to Cleo? Because that's also been kind of, I don't know, criticized by some film viewers as representing her choosing them over herself. Like, rather than having her own family, she kind of dedicates all of that to this adopted family.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I feel like it was more a found family aspect and kind of finding a connection with people. Because, I mean, yeah, it's not necessarily what she was going to do, representative of what would happen maybe later in her life. I mean, my interpretation is that this character is supposed to be very extremely young in this movie. So I feel like
They
there's
specifically never age her.
right, yeah. But I think it's heavily implied that that was kind of her first relationship growing up. So somewhere in like the early 20s wouldn't surprise me. So I feel like there's plenty of time for that if she wanted to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Being in pain or being alone and finding that connection that you need. It's not necessarily forever, but it's what you need there and then.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe you can see that with the family as well, that they've lost their father and they feel kind of angry and adrift without that, but they can sort of take solace and find connection with each other with this kind of like makeshift family. All right. Any final thoughts on Roma?
Watch it if you have the emotional capacity.
Yeah. Be in a good headspace. It's an intense film. I mean, I found it quite hopeful and humane. There's
I
definitely
did
some
too,
really
for
tough
sure.
scenes to watch, but I think the final shot did fill me with a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's
but
the point.